Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to talk about the LEC format. The groups have been announced. Let's talk about how they were formed before we talk about the format and break down the whole situation with the teams. So basically, it was a situation where both number one and second got put into separate groups. We have Koi here in Group A. Let's call this Group A because it's called Group A. Then you have Group B, which is G2. They were second place. Koi was first place. And then the following seeds, basically, KC, Fnatic, and so forth, they basically chose which group they're going to go in. Those were the rules. So if one group is full out till 5, the rest get auto-slotted into the next one. KC chose to join Koi. So KC believed that G2 is stronger than Koi, and that's why they hopped in here. Fnatic don't want to be create a group where there's many demons already. You could do some freaky shit if you're very confident and just jump in here, Koi KC, and already push them out. But I think every man for himself, everyone just wants to qualify. So that would be a little bit too crazy, of course. Then the follow-up is GX was 5th place, and they chose to be in Group A. And then Team Heretics was 6th place, and they chose to be here. Vitality is the follow-up. I have no idea why that became so thick out of nowhere. What on earth just happened? Let me fix that again. So Vitality was next, and then we had the BDS joining this team because it was seed number 8. And then finally, we had SK Gaming as the 9th seed, and then Navi auto-slotted in because Rogue was 10th place in the previous split. So these are the groups. I do think on paper, Group B looks weaker. I'm not so sure how BDS will land with their new jungler in Bukada and, of course, Rooster coming in. I do think that GX and Vitality being whole and having, just one minor change in the superposition for Vitality, that should be an upgrade, I think, due to experience. Even though I don't rate Fleshy super high, I do think just having someone with experience in the role is going to go a long way, unless Niski added something macro-wise, but I don't really think Vitality, had a lot going on for themselves beyond like individual skill. I do think that these two teams are the ones that can cause, upset damage to teams above them to disrupt potentially the top two. But other than that, I do think things are fairly balanced because in the end, I do think that SK probably look like the weakest team. Navi, in my opinion, should be a little bit better than them, and we will see. I don't know if you guys heard the rumors of that the Rock spread. He likes to do that on the Esport Maniacos podcasts and so forth. He mentioned that a certain Korean top laner already wants to go home. I don't know how substantiated that is. Rox likes to ruffle feathers always with some cryptic messaging, but it seems to be in reference to the SK top lane. I don't know if they scrimmed him and he just played bad and he wanted to go home or something like this. Didn't he didn't really. He didn't look that great, in my opinion, in the context of playing in the tournament that was happening. Of course, the NNO Cup, he didn't look too good. So who knows? I don't think it really matters. I don't need to dwell on that too much. The format is single round robin, a best of threes, hard feelers as per usual. So basically, if you are 5th place in your group, you are out. There is no big summer playoffs at the end that are based on like points or whatever. This is the playoffs that qualifies you to the World Championship. Being top 2 is insanely important because it gives you the Guardian Angel. As you can see here, these two teams, like these 4 teams, they play number 1 seed versus number 2 seed, number 1 seed versus number 2 seed. They play each other here. And if you win this best of 5, you're already qualified to Worlds. That's how OP this position is. The other teams have to fight to the death. Seed 3 versus 4 needs to fight from the get-go, and they need to fight from the get-go, and then they play a team here, of course, that is waiting. And then you have the losers dropping down, and so forth, right? So that makes, for all the teams, that is 8 teams, and double elimination bracket for these teams, but you win here, you're already top 3 slotted in, right? Because this one, the next team goes into here, waiting after the upper bracket final. And then if you lose here, you're 3rd, right? So winning here, auto Worlds, which is super massive. So much is already weighing on these best of 3s that they need to play, which is going to be absolutely crazy to watch. Things are going to go by fast, and it will be super interesting to follow. There's no fourth seed for Europe this time around. Nothing that NA and EU is going to compete over, nothing like that. It's only 16 teams at the World Championship with no play-ins. The only play-in portion really is, of course, one best of five that will happen between Korea and China because they were the top two teams at MSI, so they're fighting for the last spot to make a even nice number in 16, because otherwise each major region is only sending three. LTA North and LTA as a whole, they're sending three teams. LCP is sending three teams. EU, LPL, Korea, 15 plus one, right? In my mind, in terms of making this group format, it's imperfect. Usually when groups are made, you have the teams choose, back and forth and kind of like a snake draft. This is something that has happened. The tricky thing is the seeding, usually between spring and summer. Like this is in the last years where we have had basically the most amount of roster changes. The amount of roster changes that have happened during this period, last couple of years, is massive. Think back to KC as an example. They revamped pretty much the majority of the roster with Kana coming in, Closer coming in, Vladi coming in, and so forth. Like this is where big changes happens. BDS made changes, no more irrelevant, no more 113. You had, of course, SK Gaming also revamping the roster. You have, of course, the change in Poby for Fnatic, which makes, the seeding imperfect in terms of making choices, because a team that could be stronger is, on paper, a later chooser and so forth. But we shall see. A lot of pressure from the get-go. There is going to be so much on the line instantaneously. Making top two is incredibly important, and dropping, a series like, for example, Fnatic did, dropping one against SK in the previous split is going to be very, very, very costly. Because at least in the previous split, right, if you think back to it in the spring playoffs, where the teams kind of landed, you played a single round robin playing against 9 other teams, which meant that one loss might not have weighed super, super heavy. Getting into top 4 was easier, of course. It was easy and more natural. Here, one misstep and there's no recovery pretty much. No recovery at all. And it's going to be a big deal to also get seen number 1 to play against number 2. But I do think the relative strength between Fnatic, G2 and KC and Movistar Koi is going to be rather similar. And now this takes us to everyone's favorite part. Let's talk about team strength. Let's do LEC 2025. I have no idea what this is. I don't want to make a whole player one. I just want to talk about the teams. Is Navi here? Yeah, Rogue is here. All right. Top 3 GOAT. I have no idea. Just delete these roles. I feel like nobody really deserves S. All right. So this might come to everybody's surprise, but I do think that international experience is super important. I think G2, going to EWC, going to MSI, getting to scrim and interact with all of these teams, I think is a massive advantage. I do think that G2 overcame some important hurdles. As you all know, like I rated G2 very low coming into the internationals. But in the context of Europe, I do think that G2 should be like a favorite coming in. Even though, KC and the fans were talking big about how they would do better internationally and so forth, they did struggle with a lot of problems regionally. The jungle and support synergy wasn't there. Kalis was kind of underperforming. In my opinion, I think that the steady rock in Kana was definitely there. I do think that KC have a massive, massive upside in terms of their skill. But I do think that it's going to be, not guaranteed that they're going to achieve that, like I need to see more. I do think that their potential is insanely high just because of how good their individual players are. I do feel like G2 is kind of working with a stronger foundation currently. And I think that that is going to be, so important. It depends, how do KC use their time? How did they use their time leading up to this? I don't think it was the easiest thing to get very, very good practice in Europe during MSI times, in EWC times, because these teams have been inactive, for almost 2 months now, which is super, super long. So we don't know what the teams are going to cook up. Maybe it's something that even hurts them, who knows? But in the end, KC, I do think that a second place here, for me, in my mind, it does make sense. I do think from Koi's side, I think that Koi, especially here in spring, I think the big thing for me with Koi is the fact that they have managed to find a playstyle that really, really plays into their strengths. I think Giorgio Pune looked a lot better. I think Elioya and Alvaro looked fantastic. I was a little bit disappointed with Elioya at the internationals. I had higher expectations of him because I do think that he's a really, really good jungler. I think that Koi, the main comparison here for me between Koi and KC is the fact that I think that Koi as a team are playing closer to their ceiling and they have a clear identity, while KC have an identity crisis. And at the same front, Koi has also gathered a lot of international experience, which is a very, very big deal. I think that KC has a high potential ceiling, but I do think that Koi is a safer team to place here. I wouldn't be surprised at all if KC make like a run, because I do think their individual players are strong. I think if anything, out of the top four, I do think Fnatic is the one that carries the most amount of risk. With the change to Poby, I do think that it can carry a lot of upside, because I have talked about Poby extensively. I do think that he's a very good supportive player in the sense that I think that he uses base timer super well. I think that he manages side well, and he's always ready to participate, which is it's a big strength, really, really streamlining the game process. I think that the big games for T1 was when he was there to support his jungler in recent times. So think Rise and so forth. And in a world where Fnatic manages to piece this together, and them having newfound motivation with the carrot and the stick that of course Grubs put to use, that is a world where Fnatic of course make a run for it. But I do think I do put value into the international performance, not international performance, rather the international experience. I think G2 and Koi being so busy over the last months really, really have has put a lot of experience behind them. I just think that going through the last 2 months and being active against the best teams in the world is so much better than rotting in Europe. I think that's so strong. I think that's so OP in the context of this. So while I give these guys like a higher chance, I do think that Fnatic and KC carry a very, very big upside. And I do think, I'm going to make a bigger video about the state of Europe and things that needs to change and improve, and details and variables that people don't pay attention to. Like, people think that Europe is in complete shambles. I think for many years it has. But the main detail is that if you look back at past years, the only thing that shrouded like the community from the delusion that LEC is okay is the fact that G2 could be competitive. But sometimes one move can be very fragile and can disrupt a team performance. I think the main, detail that really, really signifies if a region is doing well or not is by the average. When G2 masked all the problems, you have to remember that a very weak Fnatic was always the second best team in Europe. And there were moments where Mad Lions were and so forth, I get that, but Fnatic was a very, very weak second team. BDS was also the type of team that could never disrupt and challenge. And if you look now where Europe is at in comparison to last year, we don't have Rogue anymore, right? That's a massive plus, right? We have another org out that just, and an org in that wants to actually play and actually become something regionally. You think about Koi and, of course, KC. They have made massive improvements, right, in terms of where they were in the last couple of years and how they move forward. I do think that KC is a fantastic addition to, of course, Europe. If you just think about the names they have brought to the table and how they've managed to become a very unique team within the LEC and at the same time be competitive, bringing players up like Vladi, Kalist, bringing back Kana basically from the dead like Lazarus, and him being one of the best top laners, it's very evident that KC is very positive for the region. KC last year was struggling, right? Koi, the same thing. I think the improvement with Jojo Pune, adding him, this is an organization that is good for the region. I think this is the main thing that you need to highlight. If G2 made, of course, the misstep with Mickey, I still believe that, but that's something that can happen. Sometimes a player like Canyon stays on Damwon and he didn't choose a team, and then 2023 goes to shit, right? For Damwon, like they went to Worlds, but it was kind of looking, boring and wonky. And then finally he made the move to Genji, and suddenly the whole region became stronger, right? GMing and the moving of certain pieces can make teams so much stronger and also bolster a region. If you look at the LCK, in the context of LCK, you have, of course, right now, this year is probably the best GMing we've ever seen in the history of LCK in terms of how stacked all the talent is on the top 3 teams, and also how many new rookies are coming in to actually fight for the spots of the usual suspects, like the amount of challenger rookies that have come up, and at the same time how stacked the top 3 is in terms of bringing back Ruler, Canyon on Genji. Even the Keen move to Genji is massive. Hanwha Life with Zeus, and then Doran with T1, and Doran on T1 looks like a new revitalized player with additional strengths. That, of course, requires teams to be very ambitious and, of course, wanting to, achieve more. In the context of the other teams, right, it's like Vitality is trying to do the rookie roster right. They're struggling with the super position. BDS are also actively making changes to be competitive. SK is like the lowest budget team in the league. They're trying to just, recycle ERL talent that made top 3 in EMEA Masters. So that is a place that maybe can have some improvement, right? But somebody needs to be 10th place, right? Someone needs to be the weakest. Navi, as mentioned before, I'm sure they're just going through the end of this year in a way where they understand that, we have some contracts here that are running out and we can't spend too much money. Understandable. Giants as well with Jackies is an interesting prospect, Lot and so forth. It's like you have teams that are trying to achieve something. The main thing is that you want teams that never, get complacent, right? Fnatic was a team that was complacent. They were like, oh, we made Worlds. We can keep the same core. We can keep the same core. We're making Worlds. We can keep the same core. We can keep the same core. They knew about the issues that they faced this year. They knew about them. But it took 2 splits in the toilet for them to make this change where options were very limited, right? This is, of course, one of those problems. It's like the context of KC, and firing me. It's like, even though I think it was a ridiculous decision because they shouldn't have hired me in the first place then, because like the GM knew me, but they realized, oh, our vision looks different and our future vision is not involving Yamato, and we're going to move on. They just took the bullet in the head. It is what it is. Spring Split definitely didn't look better. Probably looked worse in my opinion. But then they revamped everything and they, made a plan for the future around Kalist, around Vladi and KC now. They won, of course, Winter Split. They did well at first stand. They are enacting their vision. And I think that's so important. Each team needs to have a vision of what success looks like. But more on this maybe in a different video. I did churn out a lot of my points here. So let's just continue with the rest of the assessment. I think Giants is an interesting team. I think that they could, be cool. I feel like they are a little bit of an outlier, but we shall see. I think the Giants did pick up a lot of, steam and did better as things moved forward. And I think that they are a solid B tier team. I think Vitality and BDS are the teams that I would put here. I think maybe Team Heretics right behind. And then finally, I would put Navi and then SK last. I think that maneuverability, I do think there's a chance that Navi move up. I have zero faith in SK. I'm really, really uninterested in them. I think Vitality could also potentially move up, and there's a world where, the Rooster, very, very exciting challenger prospect does well. But I would need to see more. I do think Irrelevant was a very, very, it was a black hole of just inefficiency for BDS last split. I think in a lot of the games they were playing without a top laner, and that was very, very awkward for them. I think there's a world where BDS move up here, Vitality too. I think Vitality has a lot of upside. I like Chayek. I like Naknako a lot. I think they are a little bit more proven in what their upside is. So I'm putting them a little bit above here. I think Team Heretics, their biggest strength, in my opinion, is that while I saw improvement from Stand and Shio, and I think that as junglers, jungle and support, like if I could make a team with Stand, Shio, Naknako, Shayek, and Kazi, I think they would it would be it would be a good team. I feel like that's what's missing. I need to see more for Linsas, more from, of course, you know, Fleshy. I need to see what they're gonna cook up together as players. It's going to be interesting to follow. But Team Heretics, my final point about them is that I think that they are playing very close to the ceiling. I'm just not excited enough about their solo laners. I think Flacket as a player is very solid. But I feel like this team just really, really lacks firepower. I think they are very, very good at taking opportunities, beating teams that are uncoordinated. And I think there's a world where, even though I think Team Heretics have less of an upside than, let's say, a BDS and Vitality, I think there's definitely a world where they get the most out of their players and more out of the players than BDS and Vitality do. So there's a world where they sneak some wins just because of them playing very close to their potential ceiling. It's kind of like a miniature version of Koi, Koi being the team that, of course, really, really play very, very close to the ceiling recently. And I think that's super, super good. And even though I mentioned the context of the tournament, I think it's very, very good for G2 and Koi. Every other league started this week after EWC. LPL, LCK, LTA, LCP, all started. Koi and G2 are receiving grace. They're receiving grace, a break, and also they are flying from Saudi Arabia. It isn't that big of a deal when you fly from Saudi to, of course, Europe. So they're chilling. I don't think that fatigue is going to be that big of a deal. I think these guys are going to be hungry, and I think they're bringing a lot of lessons in. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But I repeat, these 4 teams, they're going to fight to the death. And I think it's going to be super, super interesting to follow. Obviously, on the topic of Europe and their problems, I think a lot of people often talk about very surface level things like, oh, they don't train hard enough or practice hard enough. I think definitely I can probably go into every single team here and after week, like point out, like trim a lot of fat in the day in terms of inefficiency. I'm sure I can do that. But I think that's also a very surface level of viewing things, because building a very strong region takes time, and the bad actors do a lot of harm. Small moves can also do a lot of harm. I think the next video I'm going to drop on Europe is going to be in the context of how the European history from 2020 to 2025, how there were decisions between this period that made Europe much weaker than it could have been. Because sometimes, it could be as simple as, G2, they made a move on paper that made a lot of sense. They signed Reckless. And that was a context that didn't work out for anybody, right? G2 was weaker, didn't make Worlds. Reckless left Fnatic, Upset joined Fnatic. That left a power vacuum. And in that same year, we lost players like Bwipo. We lost Inspired, right? Well, Inspired left, they left 2022, right? That was later, but we lost like Nemesis as well in the process. There's certain key players, losing them does impact the region as a whole, but I think that's for a different video. I want to talk about what's good about Europe, what went wrong about Europe, and how important always, being bold in your risk assessment and figuring out how to use pieces that other teams don't utilize to make them work for you, right? For example, how Excel signed Mickey, which was a really big deal, or how we managed to sign Wunder when nobody wanted him for some godforsaken reason, right? There's definitely a lot of, people that are underutilized. I think the best example is Casey, the one I mentioned with Kana, right? But there you have it. Some discussion, LEC is starting. Yes, I have no co-stream. forever homeless. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.